So in today's video, we are going to be celebrating the 8,000 subscriber milestone. Thank you to everybody that's subscribed. And as mentioned in the community post, I was thinking of doing a questions and answers video. In other words, I want to do like an ask me anything kind of a thing. So thank you to everybody that sent in their questions. And just so you guys know, once we hit 10K subscribers on YouTube, I do have something planned. I do want to do a giveaway, and as well as I also want to do another giveaway. So if we reach 1,000 followers on Twitch, I also want to give something back to you guys. So I am going to be announcing what that's going to be in a little bit. I'm just basically ordering everything, but it's going to be hype, boys. It's going to be hype. So stay tuned on socials. I will be sharing what I'm going to be giving away once we hit 10K and 1,000 on Twitch. But in any case, let's get started with the video. And for the first question, we actually got one that was sent in on Discord. And by the way, if you guys do not follow the channel over there on Discord, make sure to go do so. We actually have conversations. You guys can speak with me. We have a good time over there. But King of Horror actually asked me top 3 ways OG RE4 is better than RE4 remake. Okay, so this is actually a great question to start off the Q&A. And I gotta say, for those of you that don't know my thoughts on the remake and OG RE4, I've always been a fan of RE4 in general. So I thought that the Capcom did a fantastic job with the remake. I recently kind of shared my thoughts on the whole thing when I recently interviewed the voice actor for Leon, aka Nick Apostolides, over at Calgary Expo 2025. So yeah, it's honestly, I thought the remake did a fantastic job, but this is a good question mostly because there were things that the remake did change. Obviously, since it's a reimagining, they did cut some sections, they did cut some features. But in terms of things that I think the OG RE4 did better, I think we'll start off with something that they cut in terms of voice lines. And that has to do with my boy freaking Luis Serra, who, his iconic line, which I don't know if I remember like word for word, but it was when, he was in the cabin in OG RE4 and he's like, I didn't know the president's daughter was equipped with ballistics too. Yeah, like that line, I didn't know that I was going to miss it that much. The remake did kind of cut that voice line out and kind of added in the señorita, right, line, which I thought was just kind of lame. If I'm being 100% honest with you, I have no idea why they cut those lines. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it just, honestly, when I heard the señorita line, it just felt like it was like, bro, like, really? Did you really have to change that? Like, it's not that bad. Like, it's not a bad line. And also the fact that it's so iconic. Another 2 other iconic lines that I can just think of from the top of my head that I'm pretty sure the remake didn't have was like, no thanks, bro, or stuff like that. Or, the whole, I've also heard a lot of the community kind of mention this when RE4 remake released, but it was all of like the dialogue between Sadler and Leon, and of course Salazar with Leon, right? They cut down all of those, like those funny like back and forths that we had throughout the game. So I think for my first, I think the first thing would probably be all of the cut dialogue, bro. Like, now the second thing that I think OG RE4 did better than the remake was the U3 fight. Now, one could make the counter argument that the OG U3 fight was kind of unexpected. It was kind of random. Like, it looked like something that was added after the game was like already finished, because it was just really random. Like, you go into like a cage fight and like a suspended cage fight, like in the middle of like a canyon or whatever. Like, it was really strange. Like, I'm not going to lie here and say that, I'm not going to pretend and say that, oh, it made 100% logical sense. But one of the things that I will say is that the OG did it so much better. Like, I know, like, one thing that I will say about the remake is that they did add a lot of lore. Like, they added the whole Pesanta thing, especially when they made Verdugo kind of be like U3 for Eder. And, that Verdugo specifically, Pesanta, like, I like that they added all of those lore bits. But I think I missed like the suspended cage just because it was so out there, bro. Like, it was so cool. And also, as a kid playing through that section, bro, I was like, what the frick am I fighting? What is this, like a scorpion thing? It was kind of weird that they also added that for Eder as well. Like, there was no need to do that. They could have just kept it for Leon. So that was a bit kind of underwhelming. I think they just should have kept what the OG already did. But as mentioned, it is a super weird fight, right? Like, fighting in a suspended cage, but it stands out in your mind. So yeah, OG RE4 did it better. And I guess for the last thing that I think OG RE4 did better was, and this was a feature that I honestly it was a nitpick for me when I played RE4 remake. I was like, why did they take this out? Is the fact that you could shoot the merchant, bro. This, like, if RE4 remake had this feature, and you know what, when the game came out, I actually asked my community, I was like, if anybody knows how to like actually put this as a mod, for RE4 Remake, send it to me. Send it to me and I'll give you a shout out, bro. Any modders out there, please do this, where you can actually shoot the merchant, because you know what I mean? Like, it just made no merchant runs just feel great, because you could just shoot the merchant. And obviously sometimes there's like certain sections where he would come back and then you could just shoot him in the face. Like, it was just such a classic funny moment. It was such a bummer that they got rid of this, honestly. So I think those are like the top three that I can just think of from the top of my head as to things that, you know, I think OG RE4 did way better than the remake. Obviously, that, you know, as mentioned, I think the remake also did other things that was really good, that was better than the OG. But all in all, one thing that I kept hearing a lot of our Resident Evil fans, when the remake got first announced, a lot of them assumed and were kind of against the remake happening. And this was always something that I thought was kind of illogical, because it seems like a lot of the community, or a lot of people that were kind of in that stance of like, oh, we don't need a remake for RE4, we need other remakes, which, you know, is a good point. But it almost felt like that part of the community was super scared of the remake almost replacing the OG, which that's where I think the illogical side kind of comes out, right? Because none of the other RE games have done that, right? Like, we've had RE2 remake, and, you know, we've had, you know, the OG, right? But the OG you can still play, you can still buy, and you can still buy RE3 Nemesis, which is obviously OG RE3 Nemesis, which is better, right, than the remake. And so that idea that the remake would just like erase the past, almost like what Rockstar was kind of trying to do with like their definitive edition, which I guess is not a remake, but you know what I mean? Like, they basically got rid of all of their OG games, which, correct me if I'm wrong, have they brought those back into the Steam or like PlayStation and Xbox? I'm not entirely sure, but Capcom wouldn't do that. So the OG RE4 and the remake both have really, you know, great pros and cons. And they're so different from each other that you can honestly play both of them, you know, for years to come. It's always going to be there, right? The OG is always going to be existing. But as mentioned, I love both of them. So Pad Reg Fitten 699 actually sent me a question saying, with RE9 being set in Raccoon City, do you think we will see files mention OG Resident Evil characters such as Leon, Jill, Chris, and even Wesker? As if we're visiting R.P.D, we could find files about them. Plus, we see Leon's car too. Well, this is actually a really good question. And I will say, I actually missed Leon's car. I didn't see that in the trailer, but I did see that there was a lot of comments that were kind of letting me know about that. So thank you to everybody that let me know. I have to look back at the footage to see exactly where it is. But to answer your question, that could very well be the case, right? Where if we're playing as Grace, or we're playing as a different character, right? Because this is something that I also suggested in my dissection videos, is that even though we know that Grace is the main character, we could always have like an RE8 kind of a section where, you know, Leon could show up, Jill could show up, Claire could show up. You know, there's also that weird thing that that the director Koishi basically said in regards to how he mentioned all of the characters, and it almost seemed to me when I watched it, like when I dissected the video, it almost seemed like Raccoon City has so much connection to so many Resident Evil characters. So it kind of hinted at us potentially seeing other Resident Evil characters. But in terms of your question as to like, can we see files about the characters? I think that would be really cool. I think that would be kind of a wasted opportunity if we didn't get that, right? If we didn't see like stuff maybe that Leon left or Claire left, you know what I mean? Or stuff that we saw in Stars. Like, I don't know how burned down, or I guess, yeah, how exploded the R.P.D building is, but that would be really cool to find all of these Easter eggs, right, from our times in Raccoon City. So do I think that we'll find files or any like actual things, you know what I mean? Like maybe like key items, you know what I mean? Like a badge or whatever, like the USB dongle. I don't know, stuff like that. If we saw like key items, that would also be really cool. So yeah, hey, the potential is there, and I definitely think you're onto something, right? I think that would be super cool if we found stuff like that. But yeah, hopefully that's the case, man. But great question. I definitely agree. I think that would be fantastic. All right, next question. We actually have Lord Shu, and he asks, which is your favorite Resident Evil game of all time? I'm assuming that's what he says. So I've gotten this question a lot. The way I've always kind of attacked this question is I'll give you the direct answer, but I'll also answer it how I usually answer it. And the way I usually do that is I like to split it up into eras, right? I've always done this. For example, let's start with like the first era of Resident Evil, which is like the fixed camera angles, you know what I mean? Like the OG games. I would even fit like Code Veronica in 1, 2, and 3 OG Resident Evils, as well as Code Veronica. Even, you know what? I would even add the remakes, honest, like the first remake of Resident Evil 1 and also Resident Evil 0 and that kind of first era of Resident Evil, right? You could also add Outbreak and other stuff there, but just like the fixed camera angles. And for those games, I think for me, the top ones in my list for that era has to be Resident Evil 1, like not the remake, just OG RE1, and as well as Code Veronica X or Code Veronica, whichever. It doesn't matter. But I guess maybe I'll say Code Veronica X just because Wesker shows up more in there, right? And obviously we're all Wesker bros here, bro. We're all fans of Wesker. So I think for those two, just because First off, I love the OG Resident Evil 1, and I actually prefer the aesthetics of OG RE1 more than I do for the remake. Because one of the things that I really loved about OG RE1 was just like, it was just the vibes, dude. Like going into like a mansion in the middle of the woods, everything looks freaking like awesome. Like it looks like the aesthetics of like the wallpaper and all of that that's everywhere is like the painted walls and stuff. Not to mention also, the fact that once you go into the mansion, everything is really well lit. Like it's just well lit, and it kind of adds to the creepiness factor because it almost looks like we're in the middle of the forest and there's a mansion where all of the lights are 100% on, bro. Like there's no areas. I mean, there's some areas that are kind of dark, obviously, but you know what I mean? Like it's weird that there's just it's so well lit, right? As opposed to the remake where they kind of made it, kind of like, more of like a darker kind of ambiance, right? Like where they added like candles in a corner, right? Obviously the OG also had like that candle room and whatnot, but you know what I mean, right? Like it's almost like that kind of, I'm talking about the lighting in terms of like glowing in the corner, right? Obviously that's due to hardware limitations of the OG, I'm assuming, but the fact that everything is super well lit is just so creepy and I love it. But for those reasons, I think that's why I prefer the OG, just for the aesthetics or the vibe reasons, right? As opposed to the remake. And also kind of in terms of Code Veronica is actually, I think, one of the first games that Resident Evil games that I beat that was fixed camera angles. And bro, again, I love the aesthetics of Code Veronica. I know a lot of people don't like Code Veronica, which is kind of trippy for me because like just the architecture, like the locations, it looks like somewheres that you would actually want to be in, right? Like for example, the palace, like they have that section on the second floor where you could actually just go there, do some slots, sit down in the poker table. Like that's a really cool room to hang out in, you know what I mean? Or even like the entrance to the palace where there's like dogs that attack you and where Wesker like freaking chucks Claire and he's like, I despise Chris, like that whole section is so like I don't know, it gives the vibe of like somewheres that I would want to chill, and even like the castle. I will say though, the castle is a little bit creepy with the freaking like weird big ass doll that's hanging, but just like the locations is crazy. Like a freaking mansion in Alaska is insane, bro. Or sorry, not Alaska. What am I saying? Antarctica is crazy. Like that's so weird. But I think just like the locations in Code Veronica are so awesome. So anyways, just like a long story short, I think I'm gonna have to go with OG RE1 for the first era. And I guess moving on to like the second era, I think that's where the action kind of started. You could technically add like RE3 Nemesis because I think that's where like the actual action started, or even Code Veronica. But just for the sake, I think we'll add like the third person era, you know what I mean? Just with action packed. And for that, I had fun with all of those games, especially playing cooperatively with one of my best friends. Oh, actually a lot of my friends, I played RE5 and RE6 growing up. But I have to give it to OG RE4. I think this was actually the game that solidified me as a Resident Evil fan. Like as a kid, I beat OG RE4, I think like plus, I could think 45 times. I don't even remember after because that's when I lost count, but I played that game so much, bro. I played it so much. I played it to death. It was such a good experience. And honestly, I love that game in particular. Like it's such a classic, bro. It's such a classic. But I think since I have so much respect for it as making me like it solidifying me being a Resident Evil fan, I think I have to give it to OG RE4 for that era of the third person. And then we move on to like first person. Obviously, I am skipping over like a bunch of like spin-off games, Orc or like Revelations 1 and 2, but we're just talking about the mainline games, right? And then, we'll move on to the first person, which I think is, probably one of my least favorites in my opinion. And obviously you guys have probably heard me, all of my points as to why I thought Resident Evil 7 is a good game, but it's not my favorite game. I thought it was way too far away from Resident Evil. I would even say too, RE6, 7, and 8 were way too far from the Resident Evil formula. Obviously, RE6 played the action way too much. RE7 played the horror way too much, and RE8 just kind of played like the metaphysical like way too much, like paranormal aspect way too, especially with the Mega Mice Seed and the Shadow of Rose DLC, which I think is one of the worst DLCs of all time, just because it ended up feeling like supernatural or like paranormal in the sense that it's like Stranger Things. So for that section, I think I would have to pick RE8, mostly because it had a lot of RE4's kind of connections on it. But that's just a long way of saying that I think maybe RE8, RE4, and then RE1 for the total. But I guess to answer Lord Shu's question directly, it's kind of hard, bro. It's kind of hard. That's why I kind of answer it like that. But I think just for the sake of answering the question, I'll just say OG RE1, just because that basically started it all, right? And also, I didn't mention too, for the remakes, I think I would have to pick RE4 Remake, even though RE2 Remake, I will say personally, I actually, honestly, RE2 Remake made me like RE2 Story a lot more, which is funny because a lot of people actually don't really like the remake just because of like the B scenario inconsistencies, which honestly, I don't really care because Resident Evil, like, there's always plot holes in the Resident Evil lore. So for me, I don't really care about that. But it's kind of weird because OG RE2 is a game that I didn't grow up with. I didn't play it until I was like 15 or 16, and that's when I beat it. And I have to say, I did not like the second half of the game's like aesthetic. Like even the police station, I just didn't like the aesthetic of it. It didn't feel like a police station. I don't know. For me, I just didn't really get it. I didn't really get the vibes of like the first, like the police station. And then also I will say the laboratory, once you get in the OGRE4, like you pass the factory or whatever and you get to the labs, I think that's when it kind of lost me in terms of vibes. It took me out. Like I didn't really believe that this was an actual location, as opposed to the remake where they really did a fantastic job with the locations. And it's funny how I'm always bringing up like the aesthetics, or I guess the vibes of a location, but when it comes to Resident Evil, I don't know, that's very important for me. I don't know why, but I will say the remake did a fantastic job of making me kind of a fan of RE2, because before I always thought RE2 was kind of mid, but RE2 Remake really made me appreciate RE2. So, and I know that's a hot take, but as mentioned, I think just I didn't really get it, right? I prefer OGR3 Nemesis over OGRE2, which is kind of funny, right? But anyways, let's move on to the next question. We actually have Sinan Thashin, who's actually been a long time subscriber. Thank you so much, man. He says, congrats on 8K, dude. Love your content and happy to have found it back in 2023. Okay, really? Wait, it's been since 2023? For some reason, I think, it's kind of hard to tell too, because Sinan Thashin used to be, in the chat all the time, but he hasn't been in the chat like in my live streams for quite some time. So but it honestly feels like longer than 2023. So that's kind of trippy. It feels like honestly like 2022, or I think maybe a little bit more. I don't know. I didn't know it was 2023, but that's awesome, dude. Thank you so much for all of the support, bro. But anyways, it says, keep up your hard work and also love the podcast with your guests. Well, thank you, dude. That's something that I wanted to start roughly around 2 years. No, since 2022, when we first had Charlie Kraslovsky and Andrew Salo from the Residents of Evil, when he was doing the Keeper's Diary. That was the first interview that I ever did on the channel, and I really liked it. Honestly, it was such a good kind of discussion. And since then, we've had so many guests, right? So many Resident Evil creators like Ink Ribbon, right? We've had, the Professional, who's not a Resident Evil creator, but he does, variety gaming. He's also super well known for GTA. We talked about Dead Rising. We've had a lot of actors like speaking of Dead Rising, we had the actor Jace Patrick on. We had so many discussions, honestly, and there's way too many people to name. But thank you to everybody that subscribed. If you guys don't know, honestly, subscriptions, they do help me out a ton, mostly in the fact that with more subscribers, I get more, opportunities to interview cool guests, right? It does make my life way easier to be able to get you guys better and bigger content like that. But anyways, I just wanted to say that. Thank you to all of the subscribers. But anyways, let's go to Sinan Thashin's question. He says, my question would be, when would be the next time you would play through all of the Resident Evil games on the channel? Would it be for a specific milestone, or you have a planned time? The next time. Yeah, so that's a great question. You know what? It's good that you specifically said next time, because I think we've basically covered everything. I think the first ever game that I streamed was RE1, but the first game that I played on the channel was actually Revelations, which is funny because we just beat raid mode on Revelations recently with one of my viewers, who helped me out when it got really hard near the end of raid mode. And by the way, he actually wrote a question, so we are going to be getting to him. It's AKA David. Yeah, go check those streams out, boys. We just finished it literally like last week, so it was such a blast. But yeah, that was basically the first game we played. OGR2, OGR3. I think like all of them basically. The only games that I haven't played on the channel is RE7 and RE0, which I don't think is surprising if a lot of you guys know that I'm not the biggest fans of those games. Like, they're good games, but I don't know. Just for me personally, I play them every once in a while, bro. Like, it's like well, Resident Evil 7 I only played for 3 weeks. I beat it. No, but we did play the DLC though. I have to say, we did play all of the DLC. We streamed that like, I think 2 years ago, but the actual main game, no, I played only 3 weeks. I got the platinum and then haven't looked back. I beat it like 7 times or something, got the platinum and then haven't looked back. So I do have to play those games, but we've also haven't played certain games that I definitely want to cover. Like, for example, Gun Survivor is a game that I've never played. Gun Survivor 1. I had Gun Survivor 2 as a kid, but I mean, it's kind of sucks, right? There's no story. It's kind of just like an arcade mode. Also, Umbrella Corps I've never played, which I've heard is complete trash. That's why I just kind of stayed away from it. And Oh, Dead Aim. Dead Aim is a game I've never played ever. And it's funny because every time I looked for Dead Aim at like a store, a video game store, as a kid growing up, because I wanted to play it, I knew of the game existed, but I would always just find Outbreak File 2, which I did play as a kid, but I never beat it because I was like, I don't know, I can't play online. I don't know what the frick I'm doing. We are going to be playing Outbreak though on the channel, which is also another game I've never played on the channel. So I've actually never beaten it. That's going to be hype. And also Gaiden. I've never beaten Gaiden. Like I've never played it, never beaten it. So we have to do those three. And then after, I think we're basically done with all of the games. Like we've played Reverse, we've played Resistance. Have we played Resistance or am I tripping? I actually don't know now. Shoot. No, I don't think we've streamed Resistance, but I think we've basically played every Resident Evil game, or definitely like the majority of the mainline games. So I definitely want to do that for sure. We're going to probably play all of them again. You know what I mean? Like it's going to happen. But am I going to be doing a marathon? No, I think if we ever do like maybe like if we ever get 100K subscribers, then maybe I'll do like a marathon, or we'll see. Who knows? This maybe at 50. We'll see. But of course, since this is, you know, primarily a Resident Evil channel, even though I have to play so many other games since I've been covering Silent Hill, what else? Onimusha. I've been getting involved with Dead Rising. Like there's so many other games that I have to play as well on the channel. So hey guys, we got a lot to stream, and obviously the bigger we get, the more I'll be able to stream with you guys. It's all dependent on that, right? But yeah, I think that's a great idea, Sanantation. I think we will be playing other games. It's not just like a one and done kind of a thing. We will keep playing them, man. So yeah. And he also says at the end, also you should definitely stream a game called Unknown Tapes. It's a dinosaur horror game inspired by Dino Crisis and Outlast. Well, dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't even know that there was another Dino Crisis inspired game, so I'll definitely check it out. Though that is a bit concerning because I did play a little bit of Outlast and I didn't really like the fact that you couldn't fight anything. Like it was just you with the video camera. So I don't know. We'll see. I'll check it out. But dude, if it's anything like Dino Crisis, I'll definitely play it, bro. That's I love Dino Crisis, man. But anyways, thank you so much for the question, dude, and thank you for the long time support. Anyways, let's move on. So we were just talking about David. David is the one that just has been helping me on raid mode. We just finished that last week. But he basically says, when did I start my channel? This is a good question because for those of you that don't know, I basically started in 2021. That's when I started. I made my channel in February of 2021, but I didn't post until I think May of 2021. So even though my channel is technically like that's the anniversary is like February, I think 14th. No, I think 28th, something like that. But in reality, I didn't post until May. But my reasoning to why I decided to make a Resident Evil channel was because I wanted to get into gaming and I wasn't sure. It was actually split into two. I was like, either I do a Yakuza channel because I'm such a Yakuza fan. I've been playing it since I was literally like 12. Yeah, like a long time, bro. Since like the game came out, essentially. I think a year after the game came out. I've been a huge Yakuza fan, but I did get burnt out of the series just because all the games are just so repetitive and it's so much content that I did get burnt out. So I was like, I could do this because I'm really good at those games. I've gotten platinums for a lot of them. And then, and then the second obvious question was Resident Evil. So I was like, I've always been good at Resident Evil. It's always been super chill. Like it's super easy for me to get like a platinum, and for all of the remakes and the new games it's taken me like literally like 3 weeks to get at like 100%, right? Like I'm really good at it, and it showed. My first video got like 2,000 views, which was crazy, bro. We'll talk about that later. Somebody else also asked me that question. We'll talk about what that video was, but thank you, David, for the question. Let's move on. Okay, so these are actually questions that I got on Instagram. So for starters, we actually got Zombfected349, who's actually a friend of the channel. Yeah, Zom says, will you cover some Dying Light content this summer leading into Dying Light the Beast in August? This is actually a really good question, and it's funny that Zom asks this because we were actually supposed to collab and do a Dying Light kind of stream, right? We were going to stream both of it. We're going to play the game because I've never played Dying Light, because I was supposed to cover Dying Light the Beast, like the trailers and stuff, but then we got RE9 news, bro. So I do want to cover it. Like I said, we were going to stream it together, so we'll see how it is, right? I mean, I'll let Zom know. But anyways, let's move on to the next question on Instagram. Walker Dead 2019 basically let me know, do you think Capcom could bring back Claire and Jill in a future Resident Evil game like Resident Evil 9 or a spin-off? This is something that I did discuss in my dissection videos because that was something that the leaker kind of got wrong in the past. He did say, Dusk Golem, aka Aesthetic Gamer, did say that in 2021 that Jill was supposed to be the main protagonist, and then he forgot he said that, and then he said, I don't know where these leaks are coming from, and it's like, you basically said that, bro. So, but as I've stated, right, I mean, it would be awesome if we got you know, Jill, Claire, Barry, I don't know, all of the guys, Chris, kind of all show up at some point. It could be like a DLC, or it could be in the same fashion as like RE8, basically at the end where, you know, Chris, he shows up just, you know, to be a badass essentially in RE8. So that could definitely be the case. And also, as you mentioned, you know, whether we should actually see them in a spinoff, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think honestly, we need to see a lot more characters aside from Chris and Leon, which we've seen for so many years. You know what I mean? Like, we need to see more Jill, man. Like, especially after seeing Jill back in action in Resident Evil Death Island, which would be in 2015. So there's several years there where we could do, especially with kind of the weird time skip that they did, where it's roughly around 30 years after October 1st, 1998, which honestly I'm not the biggest fan. So if we get like a Revelations 3, if we get like a DLC that goes back into the past and lets us play as the other characters, that would be freaking sick, dude. Or even like, as mentioned in my video, Alyssa, right? Alyssa Ashcroft. I guess all in all, I just have to say I don't have any issues with your suggestion. I think that would be freaking fantastic. And by the way, thank you, Walker Dead, for being, you know, part of the channel for a very long time. I remember you in like the first stream that I ever did. So, you know, or the RE1 streams, I remember you showing up there, man. So thank you, man, for supporting the channel for so long. Anyways, let's move on to the last question. And that's obviously from Lil Irish Main on Instagram, who asks, what is the first video you ever did? All right, this is actually kind of a goated question. I'm not gonna lie. I guess to answer it for this channel, the first video that I ever did was a theory video for Jill Valentine potentially appearing in Resident Evil 8. This was basically in May of 2021, and that video got so many views. Dude, it got like 2,000 views. That was my first ever video. When I got that many views after posting just one video, I was like, bro, I guess people want to hear what I have to say. But obviously, the next couple of videos, I only got like 100 views and whatnot, because obviously I didn't really know what I was doing, right? But, and likewise with my streams, you know, funny enough, my first ever stream, and I had no idea what I was doing, bro. I basically got 180 something concurrent viewers. That was my first ever stream. So it's funny how my first ever video, my first ever stream did so well, and then after it was just like falling off. So you know when people say like creators fall off, I don't know, I don't really buy it, because I literally fell off like after I started, bro. So yeah, it's funny, bro. And it's funny because I had no idea what I was doing with my streams. I did have some understanding of how to do videos and stuff. And kind of speaking on that, which I have mentioned in the past, when I actually did the post here for the 8K celebration, it's always been super hard for me to get subscribers. You know what I mean? Like, getting views has always been kind of easy for me. I've never had an issue with views. It's always just been subscribers, dude. So if we're talking about the first ever video, I have to say, and this is something that I actually forgot about, but my aunt, roughly around 5 years ago, I believe, or yeah, 5 years, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, she showed me a video that I actually took with her video camera, like with her camcorder back like in 2004, or yeah, 2004, like it was somewhere around there, and or 2003. I think it was 2003 or 2004. And you know what's crazy is that I literally, like, this is before YouTube, but I was literally just doing a vlog. I was literally going around my house showcasing like my mom, my brother, who was really little at the time, like, and then, you know, my aunt, my cousin, and then obviously show like my 2 cousins, and then going around talking and having the camera pointed to me, and also showing my neighborhood and being like, yo, this is where I hang out with my friends. I play blades over there. I freaking have lightsaber duels over there. I play board games with my friends over there every day, right? Especially during the summer. And it's like, it's crazy that I was shooting a vlog, and this is before YouTube. And you know what's funny? I guess this is just another question, but I never thought I would ever be a YouTuber. Like, the first time I ever went on YouTube was probably like 2007, but I didn't really get didn't watch YouTube like every day, I think, until maybe like 2014 or 2015. Like, I would watch YouTube, but it's every once in a while before then. And it's crazy because I never had the idea of ever being a YouTuber, but it's funny how I kind of, you know, I was comfortable talking in front of a camera. And by the way, guys, thank you to everybody for sending a question. By the way, I didn't state this at the beginning. I am planning on doing more of these Q&As every time we hit like another milestone. I'm thinking of doing this again at 10K subscribers, so you guys can get to know me a little bit more. In anticipation for that, if you guys have any questions for me, you guys want to ask me stuff, let me know down in the comments of this video. I will ask this once we reach 10K subscribers as well. Thanks, Wesker Bros. Anyways, hope you guys take care. Thanks for watching.